Who chooses what counts as good literature? Hello, today we're going to be answering this question. My name is Justin van Huyssteen, and we're going to just jump straight into it. So, this is a question regarding the concept of good literature, right? As opposed to bad literature or whatever. So, what is good literature? Now, first off, the main thing to question here with regards to a statement like this is, well, how do we define what is good and bad in general? Just in terms of those concepts. How do you know something is good and bad? Now, we could consider it from a subjective perspective, right? Opinions, these kind of feelings, stuff like this, right? It's good because I like it, and I like the characters, and I like this, or whatever. We can also try to consider it from an objective perspective. Now, objective means scientific. That's the general. In many ways, it's sort of that. It's trying to be empirical. It's trying to study something in a deeper way, in that kind of a sense. It's trying to be scientific about it. It's not just saying, oh, my feelings are this. It's trying to be factual. Now, the problem, though, is how can we be objective with something like interpretation? Because this is all about interpretation. Right? What is good literature versus bad literature is all about interpretation. It's all about saying what you think, how you interpret it to be. So when it comes to being objective, usually this is a bit of a tricky situation because people will disagree about it. And if people can disagree, then it's not objective. And that's why sometimes people will try to have a more objective way to look at something, such as by analyzing, using specific methodologies. But the question then becomes, who is it that gets to choose what is good and what is bad literature? So we got our big question here. Who gets to choose? Who is it that gets to choose? Now, a lot of the time, we defer to experts. I've put this in quotes here because that is a question that is, a term rather that is very iffy, right? So the question of who is an expert, but we'll get to that. So we often defer to experts to determine whether literature is good or bad. Basically, we listen to experts. Do experts say it's good? Do experts say it's bad? But of course, this begs the question, how does someone become an expert? Now, there's many different ways that someone could become an expert potentially, right? One can become an expert through, I've listed just 3 here, and I'm going to explain them and sort of my rationale for why I said these particular terms: informal education, formal education, and then practice or hands-on experience. Informal education is sort of something that is autodidactic. So it would essentially be something that you are teaching to yourself, that you are learning through things like, say, reading books or listening to, say you're listening to YouTube videos like this, if you were listening to this to try to learn just for your own sake. That's all very informal. It could also be informal education also in terms of the sociological understanding of informal education is also things like, say, learning from a person to do a specific job or task or something, right? You learn from a parent how to replace the lock on a door. No one had to sit you down with an exam. They just showed you, and then you learned how to do it. That's informal. Then a formal education would obviously be, right, school, university, getting qualifications, degrees. So you could become an expert basically just by having a lot of knowledge, which would be an informal education, or a formal education, which is specifically tied to a structured way of learning, right? So you might, for instance, have a PhD in a topic. You might have like a PhD in literature, and then that means that you know more about literature than most people. However, when it comes to the concept of formal and informal education, they kind of do blend together, because if someone has become educated enough, say from a formal perspective, then a lot of their education from then on is actually very informal. So it's not necessarily because you become a doctor twice. You become a doctor once, and then you keep studying more informally. You keep building your knowledge. However, these are 2 very, very easy ways, well, not easy, but these are 2 ways in which we can see someone becoming an expert, right? You have gained a lot of knowledge about a thing, or you have gained specific qualifications that signify that you have a lot of knowledge, which also doesn't necessarily mean that you actually do know a lot. It just means that you have the necessary qualifications. But these 2 do go hand in hand. However, practice is the next one, right? Sometimes I want to know what is a good book. So who should I ask? Well, maybe a really good writer. A writer would probably know what a good book is because, they spend all their time, writing, so I assume they would know writing. So that is also a way when someone becomes an expert, basically just because they have created good versions of whatever the art form is, therefore we see them as an expert. We see someone as an expert just because they have made a lot of that thing, and the thing that they have made a lot of is also considered to be good. Quite simple. These are some of the ways in which a person could become an expert, or at least what people deem to be an expert. An expert doesn't actually have to have a formal qualification in something to be an expert, but the reason that we sort of defer to people who have a formal qualification a lot of the time in terms of expertise is because it's not just them giving their word for it. It's not them saying, "Oh, I know a lot about this topic. I do. I know a lot about this topic." That's just me saying that. But if I can hold up a certificate that says I have a master's degree in this topic, then someone will probably go, "Oh, okay, he probably knows more." Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. This then leads us to the concept of the canon. This is canon with one N. It is not a cannonball. It's not a thing that's fired somewhere. It is the canon. Also, canonical is where you would have seen it in an adjectival form. You might have seen that somewhere else. Canonical, canon. That is what we're talking about. This is essentially what has been determined to be good by some kind of an expert audience. So I say here, deciding what is good or bad is generally decided by an audience of some kind, generally an expert audience. If you have enough experts who all agree that a specific piece of literature is good, then probably it is good. That's the idea, right? So when experts agree, then a piece of literature enters the canon. The canon is not a formalized thing necessarily. Some people have tried to create lists saying these are the works that are in the canon, but no matter what, things will always be left out of that. All things might be included because of your personal, I really like this book. I like this book, so I'm going to put it here. That doesn't actually mean it should be seen as a canonical text. It's just because I like it. Which, you see, that's looking more at a subjective way of thinking. But so experts can also fall into just a purely subjective way of thinking. It's not it's not a universal thing that experts are capable of being perfectly rational, objective people. So it is also very important to know that the literary canon doesn't mean something is good. It rather means that it has been agreed upon that it is good and or important. It's not saying that it is good. Good is a subjective category. That's opinion. It's that people, experts generally, have agreed that it is good and or important. Which also means you can personally disagree. But that does not change the canon. So, for instance, there's a lot of classic books that me, as a person with a master's in literary theory, you would think, oh, this guy probably really likes, I don't know, Jane Austen. I really don't like Jane Austen. I find it very boring. And that is... I can say I disagree with it being considered canonical. I don't enjoy reading it. But that doesn't mean that my opinion gets to change the fact that it's seen as canonical. And that is an important thing to keep in mind. However, the canon has many, many, many problems. Okay, it has a lot of problems. There will be a later video that talks about the canon and the problems related to the canon. But this is just explaining who gets to basically decide whether something is considered to be good in a more universal sense. But, that's pretty much it. So basically, if you have any further questions, please, you can ask in the comments or anything like that. You can go ahead and do that. It's always great to see engagement like that so that we can also respond and answer your questions. Or perhaps make some kind of a follow-up video to address those very questions. But otherwise, if you did enjoy this, there will be more. There'll be a lot more, covering all sorts of things. So, if you did like this, do the commenting, do the liking, do the subscribing, do the sharing. There will be lots more of these, so especially if you're studying literature or especially literary theory, there's a lot here that will be able to help you. But that is it. So, have a great day further, and goodbye.